Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Rust and Redemption titled Roses on a Barstool. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen on YouTube there. We're going to listen through it from start to finish and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it, let's go, what do we got? I like the layering and spacing of the guitars and the slow strumming of those. And the double bass.
She sits alone with a neon hums, whispers a prayer with whiskey on her tongue, hands on the glass like a rosary, begging love for some mercy. The preacher said, love is patient, love is kind, but she only found it in a stranger's eyes. Roses on a bar stool, drowning in the rain. She holds the thorn, she loves the pain, searching for a heart that won't let go. Love don't live here, she should know. She used to pray by a bedside light, hands together, her knuckles white. They said faith could make you whole, but the empty never leaves your soul. The preacher said, love is patient and love is kind, but she only found it in a stranger's eyes. Roses on a bar stool, drowning in the rain. She holds the thorn, she loves the pain, searching for a heart that won't let go. Love don't live
Nice little bit of vocal
here,
right
she
there.
should know. Love don't live here, no, no.
So like that was quite a busy track, but there's a lot of stuff to appreciate and we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Rust and Redemption, the song titled Roses on a Barstool. In this section, I'm going to be providing an overall song analysis as well as any sort of applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? I think that this track is about a woman who has just gone through the ringer with love and life, and she's trying to find, she's like praying to find someone that will stick by her. And she's just, she's finding that kind and peace and love, that kindness in a stranger's eyes, but she just cannot make the full connection there. We get close to the promised land. We kind of just can't quite reach over the gap to get there. And it's a sad sounding track in a sense, I think, because there'll be people that can probably relate to it from the perspective of not really finding the one, or if you do fall in love, it's not the right person. And when we talk about like drowning on a bar stool, roses on a bar stool, like drinking our sorrows away, praying outside of that for things to improve, but just generally sort of like struggling to find and make peace with it. And just ultimately, it's just, it's a bit depressing, but I think it's a reality for a lot of people that they just can't find that happiness or that security, I suppose. I think the vocals are done well here. It's nice to have the vocal perspective of the lady in there as like the backing or harmony. I'm not sure if they're there maybe to have her voice calling out or simply to be more of a sort of a support for the main sort of male vocalist there a bit. But either way, it's nice to listen to it. There's some vibrato in there, we have a bit of vocal fry occasionally, some cracks as well for a bit of angst there. Tension expressed is palpable. We have some really sort of like compelling vocal melodies. Not overcomplicated though, we're not doing crazy stuff with them, but just enough to sort of work well alongside the really busy instrumental accompaniment. He's got a great low end as well. There's a nice sort of rumble to it, which does have presence within the track, which is really interesting because it just shows that things are quite well leveled in the mix to allow for that. You need to have a bit of resonant high end on the vocals to kind of make them stand out in that situation. And I think that they managed to make that click. I think the vocals, they sounded like they were feeling for the woman going through this. I wasn't always sure why there was vibrato. It almost seemed like we're doing it for the sake of having that sort of like feeling there. We're maybe over-expressing occasionally, but nonetheless still effective. Structurally, I think this track works really neatly. You've got verses and choruses as well as little instrumental components. Like you've got the solo section of the guitars on the right, the organs, keys, bass, drums, guitars, they're littered and build up the track really nicely. The transitions are seamless. It's very much a kind of we have everything and this is going to be it for 4 minutes kind of track. At the same time, I would have maybe appreciated a little bit more dynamic range to the piece from like a compositional perspective. It might have been nice to have had moments where it came down and became a bit more quiet and a bit more like kind of timid and intimate. It's very much a kind of show of like there's just body to it. And I'm not sure if that body was something we needed to have for the whole entire 4 minutes. But nonetheless, it was still instrumentally sort of compelling. And I think that even if it was busy, at least we were trying to do a lot of interesting things with the different instruments. I thought the organ was a fun one. We had a lot of glissandos, and we were great with the vibrato on that, the way it warbled in the mix there. There was a nice glow and warmth to it and it had a sense of spirituality, especially when we're talking about the prayers and stuff like that. There was a nice connection there. I think the kind of bluesy or sort of country phrasing there with the arpeggiated guitar parts was good there. Any strums we have are fine. There were lots of little kind of leady, kind of bendy, slidey, hammer and polyopic kind of licks there. And we had a solo section as well on the right side of the stereo field, which is a bit unusual, but nonetheless interesting choice there. I kind of like that we took a gamble there and put it on the right. Usually the guitar solo would replace the vocals in the center, but we decided not to do that here, and that's totally fine. It's nice to do something different. But I think there's a nice sort of like hum to the guitars, regardless of whether you got a bit more kind of like gain or grit on it, maybe some overdrive distortion, or whether they were the kind of single coils with a bit of kind of dust to them. They sounded kind of homely and comfortable. The bass and the low end had a nice sort of sense of body to it as well. It filled in the lower end of the frequency spectrum really neatly, and there were no issues there in regards to putting that forward. And there was some cool kind of like chromatics outside of the diatonic chords that were put in certain points for bit of tension there. Some like dominant seventh chords outside of the major and minors, which is again a very typical sort of bluesy thing. There might have even been some sort of like modular shifts there between sort of notes going like 2, 3, 4 or something like that. But it was nice to sort of like maintain the fundamentals in a way that didn't overshadow the vocals and what they were doing. I would say maybe it was a little bit busy with some of the guitar lead parts in certain situations. Because from the perspective of we had the vocals and we were kind of do a lot of stuff on the sides, and sort of sometimes you'd be like listening to the center, but then you'd be taken to the sides. And I suppose that's like fine because maybe if you want to have variation with the composition, you need to have that kind of shift. I think that would have been maybe more effective from like a dynamic change perspective where things got a bit quieter and a bit more kind of like, again, intimate there. So you could maybe have the vocals be a little bit quieter, or like the guitars a little bit quieter or something like that. And maybe like bring yourself back up to like a little solo thing after the crescendo, because if you have the guitar being quite busy for most, if not a lot of the track, then that becomes something you're used to. And then maybe when you have a solo section, it isn't necessarily as interesting because you're already used to that kind of flow with the existing parts beforehand. I think as a final note, the piano, actually not the final note because I haven't spoken about the drums. I think that the piano, working in the bluesy kind of like, not 12-bar phrasing necessarily, but the minor and major sort of fifths, as well as, working alongside the blues scale and just punctuating the mix in certain parts without being too overbearing was cool. It was a nice bit of extra sort of mid-range that worked well alongside the organs and guitars. And I have to give a shout out to the drums as well for waiting a while before they came in, and then sticking with the brushes on the crashes, kicks and snares was cool. It was just a nice sort of soft, kind of tender tone to that, where it kind of was more of a slow dance through the sadness that the person was feeling, the misery. But it just added a sense of groove and pace without trying to push too much for it to be anything more than what it was. So I feel like instrumentally it was compelling, again, a bit busy at times, but nonetheless, still is a lot to be interested in. And I think at the end, I don't know, they could have pushed it any further lengthwise. I feel like we had everything we needed to at that point. The theme overall with the minor leaning kind of makes me think that we are, with the warmth of the vocal tones and the male and female harmonies there, combined with the bluesy phrasing of the guitars and the keys and everything like that, the music is telling me that we're trying to find a coziness in the sort of the hopelessness, or like we're just kind of trying to console the person who's struggling and finally realized it's all for naught. That's the kind of feeling I get from the music with the combination of the elements there. Like once the song ends, we're just going to have to contend with the reality that we will not find love here. We're in that bar and we need to leave if we want to sort of make a change, I suppose. So it's trying to facilitate a live element as well as trying to sort of be more of a support system, having to overbearing to the person going through this. Studio production wise, pretty happy with how things are leveled and presented in the stereo field. Again, kind of an interesting decision to have the guitar solo on the right, but it's fine. Male and female vocals are positioned, they've got presence. Like there's not a lot of dynamic range. I've already spoken about how I would have preferred more dynamic range, but that's more from a compositional thing, I think. Nice enough that pumps to the bus compression. The limiting is handled. Vocals aren't overproduced as far as I can tell. And then sort of applicable constructive critique wise, I've already spoken about a few of them, to be honest. Again, it's the dynamic range of the piece. Again, from a compositional perspective, maybe having a bit less sometimes of the guitars, or like a change of pace of it, or maybe having a switch of like going even like halftime with I think we're already halftime with the drums. Just having more variety compositionally outside of the vocal parts, just to insinuate different segments, But then, I'll have another listen through it later on and sort of confirm that. This is just from a first listen perspective. From a general listener's perspective, though, I like this. I don't feel good after listening to it because I feel bad about the person and what they went through. I don't necessarily relate to it, though. I'm not the target audience. Maybe it's kind of interesting because usually with a story like this, you kind of want the person, if they're struggling, to find a solution. But we just didn't really find one here. Maybe the solution is that we were looking in the wrong place the whole time. I think music isn't necessarily meant to make you feel good, so I appreciate and respect the hustle here that we're trying to do something a bit different and not trying to sort of sugarcoat the difficulties people go through in their lives. I nonetheless feel like things are all pretty well thought out for the most part, and it'll be interesting to hear what they come up with next. So thank you for watching my review of this track from an act named Rust and Redemption, titled Roses on a Barstool, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via the various social medias and the YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SB Reacts. Spiderhands out.